I've been on a mission to photograph my life, and I've brought you guys along for the journey too. I've genuinely photographed some pretty boring stuff, but with these tips, it's taken those really boring, mundane images into stuff that is genuinely intriguing. And in this video, I wanted to show you guys the tips and tricks that I use to make my boring life look pretty interesting, and hopefully you can use some of the tips too. When I'm photographing a scene, I'm always drawn to wherever the light is and using as much natural light really to photograph and enhance the scene. But it can be the sun, it can be artificial light, and it can also be reflection light. Any form of light will really help you to develop your images, and kind of manipulating the light even a tiny bit, just even if you're turning your subject, will make the world of difference in your images. And this is purely because it can really help to develop the image's depth. It can frame a person or an object. It can really add depth between a person and the background, especially if the person is lit really well and the background's a little bit more shadowed, or the lighting is coming in from one side. As you can see, I've got my light here. I use a lot of natural light in my work, and that is usually just because I'm out and about in nature. I'm not necessarily photographing people as portraits, but just using the light where I can to make the images look really interesting. So let's take this path image for example. There are so many light pools as the image flows through. Your eye is following the path throughout the image. Well, that was the idea anyway, with all the trees on the side. And if those light pools weren't there, it wouldn't be as interesting as it is with those added light pools in the image. And for artificial lighting, you do have this image of my sister putting 2Ps into the 2P machines, and how great the contrast is with that big beam of light in the center. Again, if that big beam of light wasn't there, this image would look really flat and boring, and I think it helps to add to that depth and that bit of fun and character that's within the image. And finally, for reflection lighting, this doesn't necessarily have to be a big piece of light. It could also be objects reflecting, because again, that is still light. I took this picture down at a closed cafe about a year ago now, down at Bigbury-on-Sea, and I shot the image through the window so that you could see the sea and the sky out the back, but you can also see the reflection of all the objects that are still in the cafe towards the back windows, and the reflection on the front, and you can even still see the writing and everything that's saying their opening times. But there's a lot of reflection of certain objects, certain lights, and that is still one of my favourite techniques that I don't actually use very often, and it's something that I really should use much more. Now, colour can actually be one of the most important factors when you're trying to photograph boring, mundane images and trying to make them look really interesting. So recently, I say recently, about the last 9 months, I've been really heavy on shooting film, and I've come to a favourite of Kodak Gold 200, and I'm pretty deliberate on when I change up my film stocks, but Kodak Gold 200 is usually the go-to. I love the warmth and the just general colour science that goes behind this film stock, and it's something that I would recommend to anybody that wants to try film. And when I do shoot digitally, I try and match the colour schemes of the Kodak Gold 200 in my digital work through Lightroom edits, trying to match the colour profile so that the work seems pretty seamless throughout. But the edits and the colour stocks aren't just everything when it comes to the colours in photography. Believe it or not, the actual colours in the scene is really, really important too. And hopefully, if you've been to school or you've just lived, then you have at some point seen the colour wheel. And this is such an important thing to focus on when you're photographing boring, mundane images, as if you use things that contrast and complement each other so well by using this colour wheel, the images go from maybe like a 3 or 4 out of 10 if they're really that boring, up to like a 7 or an 8, and that is such a big jump when photographing things that aren't necessarily very interesting. And if you take this image of a couple walking down Mountbatten Pier, it's a pretty dull setting, it's pretty gloomy, but their big red jackets complement and contrast the image so well. Now, using movement in your work can be really quite interesting, especially if you're using it from a general camera shake perspective. And this is something that I think you have to be using very, very deliberately. And it's something that I'm making sure that I'm not just being willy-nilly with it. It's something that I need to be using deliberately for certain scenes, purely because the slight camera movement and shake won't be as effective if you're using it all the time. So just as a general photography thing, if you're using handheld shots, I don't particularly like to change from 1/160th of a second, because for me that's fast enough that it kind of removes any camera shake, and I'll use faster if I need to. And when I'm trying to add a little bit of a camera shake, I will shoot it around maybe 1/50th of a second, and anything slightly slower than that, so that then if I do have some slight blur when I'm even pressing the shutter, then it's going to be deliberate, and I want that when I'm get my results back from the film labs, or even just any digital work too. And I try and use this technique when I'm photographing things that relate to my childhood. This could even be like caravan settings, it could be beaches and arcades, and arcades is where I've used it the most recently. But movement doesn't necessarily just have to be with the camera, it can also be with the object or individual too. You can have it if people are moving, you can have it if you're moving and they're staying very, very still. I know that kind of relates to the camera moving and the camera shake, but it's slightly different. And using these techniques really take really simple and boring concepts and images to things that are much more interesting. I'm really trying to learn this skill set, especially in my film photography work, because it's something that I lack in my portfolio for. And I tried it recently in my recent video of vintage cars and expired film. The ideas were there, but the technique was very much off. And it's very much trying to set a tripod up with your camera, allowing yourself to focus on the object that's moving, but with a slower shutter speed. For me, I want it to be that, say for this image, that the car was going through the image and everything else looked pretty still. But you can also do the reverse of that and have the person, or say someone's cycling on a bike, and you can have them almost frozen because you've whipped the camera around and everything else looks like it's moving around them. Again, much more effective than if someone's just on a bike moving past. Yes, you can have those still shot images, but also having some movement shots really diversifies your portfolio and just images in general. This one takes a lot of patience and a well-trained eye, but trust me, the patience and the time that it takes to train this skill is definitely worth it. So the key moment itself doesn't necessarily need to be anything extraordinary or just anything special and out there. It can really be a simple moment, but it's actually noticing the moment that is most important, and therefore how you then frame the shot. So what can the key moments be? Well, for example, it could be somebody stood looking out to a river, it could be somebody shading themselves from the UK summer heat. It really can be anything and everything, but the art of the key moments is noticing the key moments and giving yourself time to do that. I was there at the beach all day and it took me a while. I didn't really notice any shots, and something just caught my eye just as I was looking around, and I saw these people sat on, I think it was their surfboards, with t-shirts and everything over their head to keep themselves cool. It was noticing that moment that really makes these key moments worth it. Again, with the guy looking out on the river, he had his dog there, but the dog is behind the bush in the shot. But I was there walking for well over 2-3 hours, and it's just going out and enjoying, and then making sure that you've got almost one eye knowing where you're going and the other one kind of monitoring the situations and to see if there's any interesting things to capture. And just to clarify that these moments really aren't manufactured in any way, shape or form. They are really just noticed, photographed and documented. And for my final point, how did the images feel? And I think that this is the most imperative point of them all, even if it's just an image of a toilet. So this is something that I've been working on for a really long time. As I'm photographing, thinking, what is it that I'm trying to portray and connect to people with? Am I trying to have a feeling of happiness and warmth? Am I trying to make the image feel cozy? Or is it something of longing and loneliness? And using the previous points mentioned helped to build almost a mini formula on how I can create those feelings and atmospheres and create some form of feeling whilst people are looking at my images, even if they are really boring. So for example, if I want the image to feel comforting and homely, I'll probably shoot on Kodak Gold 200 purely because I like the warm tones that it gives, and the subject matter will be of people laughing and smiling. And if I want a feeling of nostalgia, I will probably use some form of camera shake method to promote a feeling of dreamy and memory-like, again with those warm tones. And if I'm wanting a feeling of maybe loneliness and longing, the images will be dark and moody, maybe one person involved in the image or not even any people in the image at all. For example, these foggy day images, and the way I shot them, I wanted it to feel like nobody else was around and it was almost some form of creepy space, even though it really wasn't that far from where I live. And I personally think that promoting feelings throughout your work is really, really important to make boring, mundane images really interesting, because if you can use select techniques, then you're doing something correct in the first place, because you're trying different things, you're playing with the images, and the images aren't just, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing today, I'm up by the sea. It could be a portrait of a friend using different lighting techniques. It could be people down sat on the beach, and as I've shown you, someone sat with their t-shirt over their head to keep them cool. It's noticing moments, it's using lighting, it's playing with colour, and really just having fun with your photography. And if you can master all of those with whatever medium you have, I think that you'll really take your images from day-to-day life and take them into something that really is a beautiful piece of work. So I really hope you've enjoyed that video, and that is genuinely the tips that I use to try and keep myself on my toes to make new work and photograph the boring, mundane, and try and make life look really quite interesting. And if those tips have really helped you, please consider subscribing down below. It's free, and give it a like too. It really helps push the channel through the algorithm to reach more people, because they know people are enjoying the content. And if you've enjoyed the images that I've shown throughout the video, I do have an Instagram, and that is @GrenneyCreate. Hop over there and have a look. I'll try and link it down in the description too if you're interested. And finally, I do have a creator code with Dehancer, and that is code Grenney in all capitals to save yourself 10% off. They're a color grading plugin service across the Adobe Suite, Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve, and code Grenney saves yourself 10% on your purchases. And finally, and most importantly, I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and hopefully I will see you on the next one.